I was going to school with people that were 10 years younger than me as well, because the system is so different. I felt like in Singapore, the moment you graduate, what do? Your parents push you to get a job. But this is not the case, I've realized, in a completely different context. And actually what I really enjoyed was talking to my classmates, because a lot of them were ads, no matter how old they were and from how many different countries, they dropped everything. I realized that if I didn't have this experience, I wouldn't be thinking in this way. And so I think one thing that I loved was, even though I am mid-career, I felt like I was graduating all over again as an early 20-something year old, wondering what the career paths were going to be like for me after graduation.
And I just had a thought, right? What if the goal is not to climb up any ladder, but to find your life's work? And I heard this phrase somewhere, right? It's your life's work to find your life's work. And how do I define life's work? It's where work feels like play, or it's very natural for you, where you are in a role, in an environment, in an industry that you feel for, that is aligned with your strengths, with your vision. And I personally think it's not the easiest to find your life's work.
And I dropped everything, including my career. I was a senior account director working with clients in an agency. It was a job that gave me a lot of fulfillment as well. Dropped everything and I left. So it wasn't until I became a student and navigating life in a different country that's completely different from Singapore, navigating having a career and now being a student. So at some point, actually, to cut my long story short, I had 3 to 4 different jobs.
And I think these friendships, these experiences you have could just be a great enhancer and great accelerator for your career. So I say this to myself, and I say this to whoever's listening in, that sometimes what we think is taking a back step or a side step could end up pushing you much further down the road. Hi there. Thank you for being here with On My Own Terms. It's a podcast for the bold, the curious, and those at the crossroads of career and life. Would share it with a friend who needs to watch or hear this too. Do not forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Spotify, our socials, and at wherever you're watching or listening this from. And if you're on your own journey of change, come check out the link in this episode description or show notes. That's where the free resources, newsletter, and stories live. Real change comes from taking action. Now, back to the episode. Hey, my name is John and welcome to My Own Terms podcast. I've worn many hats across the years, from being a banker to entrepreneur to tech and e-commerce leader, and I've taken some unconventional turns along the way. This podcast is where I speak with people who have done the same. You will hear raw, honest conversations with career changers, risk takers, and bold builders who have chosen to craft their careers and lives differently. You will hear inspiring stories, gain perspectives, and learn mental frameworks and actionable lessons. If you're looking to grow, pivot, or are currently at a crossroads, this podcast is for you. Let's get into today's episode. Today, I'm going to speak with Jen. Jen is a sustainability communications consultant and also a certified ESG analyst. She runs an independent consultancy working with clients on global projects, from industry transformation initiatives to sustainability events that further the conversation across climate, circular economy, and more. She is also the co-founder of Human and Herd, a narrative consultancy that works with leaders, founders, and entrepreneurs for human-led approach to brand building. She's currently based in Berlin, and this is where she's dialing in from, and she's currently working remotely. So welcome, Jen, to this podcast. Yeah, so tell me a bit more about the place that you're at right now, and maybe give me 3 words to describe Berlin.
I'll start with 3 words to describe Berlin. Diverse, exciting, and actually, I think my last word is accepting. Yeah. So where I am right now is Berlin. I've been here in Germany for the last 3 years. I started by furthering my studies here. I'll get into that later. But yeah, I started in Hamburg and then moved to Berlin, and where I'm currently based. And yeah, Berlin's been really exciting. And I say exciting and diverse because it's an international melting pot here, kind of like Singapore. But I'm also learning so much and growing so much professionally and personally just by being in the city, meeting new people, getting exposed to new experiences. There's always something exciting to do every day, every weekend.
You spoke about Hamburg. Tell me a bit more about Hamburg. What do you do there?
Okay, I moved from Singapore in the middle of my career. I was in public relations for, I think, almost 15 years and built my career mostly in Singapore and was on a trajectory, just like many of my peers in that age. But then I got the opportunity, of course, and then decided to take the plunge had the opportunity to further my education at the University of Hamburg to do a postgrad in business and sustainability, which is what my career was, the direction that my career was going to anyway. And that's what brought me to Hamburg for the last 2 years.
Yeah, so as at this point, there's two things right in my head that I want to ask you about. First is about your career journey, and second thing is about ESG. So maybe to give context, maybe tell us a bit about what you did as in your career before you went to Hamburg to study. And then after that, we can talk and deep dive further into ESG. How's that? So what were you
Okay.
doing before Hamburg?
So I have always been in communications, but I think where my career focus really started was my earlier days as what I call an environmental activist. I was with the Worldwide Fund for Nature in Singapore, or WWF Singapore. It's an environmental NGO. I loved animals, but it was also a place where I learned so much about different sustainability issues, from what's happening in the forest, from what's happening in the oceans, and how it's affecting, people around Southeast Asia and Singapore. So I was, I think, an activist in a softer sense of the word. I was talking about some of the challenges, including climate change, sustainable sourcing, and it was something that I cared a lot about. And that's where my passion and my interest really grew. And actually, my knowledge in why sustainability matters to really started. But during that time, I think one of the most unforgettable experiences I had was actually when I was in a rainforest in Indonesia. You have to travel by car many hours into this really unknown part of, like, literally to the edge of a rainforest. And I was there to actually do content, to talk to people that were protecting the rainforest, to look at the people that were helping wildlife in the rainforest, including elephants. So that was my passion. I was there to do some content and video because I was in communications and we're doing a campaign around it. But one of the most unforgettable experiences that I had there that actually shaped the rest of my career was when I was interviewing what we call a forest investigator. So these people, they love the rainforest, they want to protect the rainforest. They go undercover and to investigate farmers or businesses that were encroaching on natural rainforests illegally. So they really put their lives on the line. It was so serious that I couldn't show their faces or reveal their identities on video. But one thing that one of them said was, we are putting our lives on the line to protect the rainforest, but please get this message to the businesses or the policymakers that can really help us protect the rainforest, because that's where they have the most power. So it made me realize that I love my forests, I love my elephants, but if I were to do anything meaningful in sustainability, it really had to be looking at working with businesses, working with policymakers. And then from then on, it really shaped my focus. And I intentionally took steps in my career after that to work more deliberately with businesses and sustainability and doing more in that area. So that then eventually took me to working with businesses, firstly in Singapore on sustainability communications. But eventually, I also felt the need to deepen my experience and my knowledge in a more technical sense of it. And that's where I wanted to further my studies. And that eventually brought me to Hamburg, Germany.
When do you realize that you're a tree hugger?
Always knew that.
I know.
When I
It's a
joined a
word.
company for animals, yeah.
Yeah, it's a stereotypical saying, right? Tree hugger, right? But yeah, I know I was just being cheeky about it. But I don't know too much about ESG myself. There is like news clips when I was watching earlier when I was younger about, I don't know, activists hugging the tree, preventing, I think, was it Greenpeace? No, what was the well-known Greenpeace, right? Yeah. From people cutting the trees and all that. So that's how the tree hugger image came about. Yeah, but is it right off from school, right off from uni, you realize that this is what you want to get into? Or when was that turning point? Tell me.
Not
when?
at all. Did not know what I wanted to do right out of school. I just wanted to go for things that were interesting, where I was learning. My first step out of school, because I was learning communications, it took me to public relations. So it built a lot of the skills and knowledge that I had. I worked in agencies, worked with businesses, big brands. I also spent some time working in the government with media and communications, all in Singapore. So in the early years of my career, it was very focused on building skills and experience and getting a good portfolio or experience out of that. It was only later, and again, things happen like that. It's never intentional for me. Doors closed, and eventually I found myself looking at this job ad to go, oh, I get to work with animals. That sounds fun. And I went for a role at the Worldwide Fund for Nature. But what I didn't realize then was that it was really the start of a wider change in society, maybe across the world as well, where not just people, but governments and businesses were more aware of some of the challenges that had to do with sustainability, like climate, for example. So that was when sustainability or climate change or the need to act on it really became more mainstream. And I was very involved in some of the work around that. So my career story has been skills first, building the experience, and then starting to apply that set of skills to an area that was my personal passion, which was wildlife and animals and sustainability now.
There are a lot of threads in my head now. I think it's about like career path versus passion, right? Some people say that you need to change your career path based on passion and passion only, but I don't think it's always a one size fits all. And I wanted to ask also, what kind of role that WWF, the green one, not the wrestling one, had to do to open office in Singapore? I think it's a global organization, and what place and what's the intention of opening office in Singapore? I know it's a lot of questions, but tell me about this WWE versus WWF saga, if you know about it, and what was the role and significance of opening in Singapore office?
I don't know WWE that well, but it was very interesting that for the 4+ years that I was there, every time I said I work with WWF, people would go, "Oh, the wrestling one," and I'd be like, "Oh no." So yeah, I think it also got people at least interested in the first 1 second of meeting me when I said WWF. The role that an environmental organization, so it's not just WWF, there are few environmental organizations or NGOs in Singapore. And the role or the opportunity, I think, for a global organization like that's in all the major countries around the world working on different problems was to use Singapore, as always, as a base to get funding, to get donations, but also then to channel that to protecting natural environments around the Southeast Asia region. So this would be the Coral Triangle that's across the Southeast Asia region, the Great Barrier Reef, slightly further out, and then you have your forest in the Indochina region, your forest in Indonesia, where there's a lot of wildlife. So it was a really enriching time of my life, I think, where I really got to look at camera trap footage of tigers in Sumatra that no one has seen before. But also it exposed me to some heartbreaking challenges, beached whales, where you open the whale and there's like plastic and flip-flops in the belly of a whale. So the scale of environmental challenges was something that I felt a lot for, but that's just me as a person. But I was lucky to be able to channel that into a career direction that eventually took me to where I am and in a way paid off professionally for me as well.
Tell me the part about paying off. I'm curious. How do you define paying off? You said paid off. So tell me more.
Yeah, so I first joined, I guess, for passion, as you were talking about. But it wasn't passion that took me this far because I have mixed feelings also sometimes, like working on something that you're really passionate about. That was me for a few years, but personally, I learned some lessons from how it really burns you out as well. But what I was able to turn this interest and the knowledge that I had about what's happening in our oceans or forests to was a more intentional career direction. So focusing on how can we work with businesses, how can we work with policymakers to address certain challenges that countries, even like Singapore, are facing, and then turn that into a career that was built on sustainability and growing it in that direction, which I still am today. Because when it comes to ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues of sustainability, it never really stops. It's never stagnant. It's constantly evolving, and the challenges or new challenges are constantly emerging. So a lot has changed since I was in a forest looking at elephants, but I think it's changed in a good way. It's become more complex. It's become more embedded in a lot of businesses around the world, including in Singapore and Asia. And there's a lot of opportunity for career growth or opportunities in this area.
What was there an aha moment that you realized that you need to further your studies? Or if not, how do you make this decision that you want to take a break in this escalating or ascending career journey and a career path to take a break and then to further your studies? How do you get to that decision?
It was not just one moment and one decision. I've realized looking back, it was more like when I pivoted or I transitioned, it was the result of several steps I took. So it wasn't just me getting on a plane to Germany that was my turning point. Actually, no. I realized looking back that it was as I grew my career, I'm like, okay, what's the next step? What can I do more of? I'll start working more with businesses and corporates in Singapore on sustainability communications. So I went there and I built up a portfolio and I worked with clients in that area. And then when the opportunity came to further my studies, and it was something that I feel like I've always wanted to do, but never had the chance to because I think I was focused on growing my career, and to take 2 or a few years off to further the studies is a big decision. But when I felt ready to go, I don't think I can grow my career further if I don't have that technical background or deeper understanding of ESG and sustainability. I might hit a wall sooner or later. And that's where I thought, okay, then maybe the next step would be to further my studies. And the opportunity then came that wasn't in Singapore, but in Germany.
Why
So,
Germany? Why Germany?
because to be honest, like I don't have a trust fund and I'm pretty normal. So one big consideration I had was I didn't want to get into debt in the middle of my career. I didn't want to get into debt just funding higher education. And we know that for certain instances, like, it can be very expensive and it's not something that's readily available to everyone, especially if you are 10 years into your career, which is where I was. You think about supporting your parents. Some people even have families to support. So it's really a luxury to fund higher education, but even uproot and go to a different country, it's a complete luxury for anyone to make the decision to do that. So for me, Germany, because public education here is free, almost subsidized, heavily subsidized actually by state or federal funding. And all I paid for was semester fees. However, the education is supported. And it's so amazing. Actually, it's still the most amazing thing because I say to my sister who has young kids, oh gosh, my annual school fees are cheaper than your kid's kindergarten school fees, which is true. And Germany and I think a few other countries in Europe do offer that opportunity to do that. And there's no strings attached to that kind of funding. And that's what supported my decision as well. But of course, I was lucky to not have to need to be in Singapore for my parents or have any other reason to be in Singapore. And I could just make this move for myself.
Yeah, on some perspective, I'm quite envious. And I think I agree with you that it is coming from a privileged position to be able to do higher education. I think 10 years into your career. Now, even if it's a privilege, and I hear you about Germany, and I know you need the technical skills, do you not think about the opportunity cost? You could have been elsewhere, and maybe you could have learned this technical stuff through another job, another posting maybe. Walk us through that decision to really, and I think it's brave, that's where I'm coming from, right? Tell me more about that decision. And why now? Why not later? Why not earlier?
On opportunity cost, interesting and great question. I didn't think about what it would take. I was so excited. Like, I have this opportunity to study for 2 years to deepen my knowledge in a subject that I've always wanted to build a career in, and nothing holding me back in Singapore. Let's go. So I was excited and I was like, and I dropped everything, including my career. I was a senior account director working with clients in an agency. It was a job that gave me a lot of fulfillment as well. Dropped everything and I left. So it wasn't until I became a student and navigating life in a different country that's completely different from Singapore, navigating, having a career, and now being a student. It wasn't until I went through the experience that I realized, oh my gosh, this is such a big opportunity cost. Because the opportunity cost to me then was looking at my peers in Singapore that was on the same career trajectory on, and they were succeeding. Because this is mid-career is where you can really accelerate. You get into leadership roles. You can see really amazing and fantastic moves. And people that do that, and I really respect. However, I was looking at all that and celebrating my friends, my peers' successes. And then I was like, oh my gosh, okay, time to go for my next lecture. I'm a student and back to project work. So that was something that I had to grapple with on a personal level. Then the second question is, why now? Why not later? Honestly, I feel like I did it too late. Would have loved to go at an earlier stage, but just never really planned for it. So as you can tell, all my decisions are very driven by instinct and maybe chance and opportunity. But yeah, I wish I had done it earlier. And for people that might be listening and thinking, should I further their education? I'm like, yeah, don't wait to do it at any stage, actually. If you have the chance to, and if you're lucky enough to do it and have the support to do it, yeah, I would be like, go for it.
The right time is always now, right? To quote somebody else, the right time is always yeah, and I don't know whether it seemed like a leading question earlier. I wasn't trying to imply that later is better, but I think sometimes, I speak for myself, if we wait for things for too long, wait for every star to be aligned, then that time might never come. So I'm just curious. I think different people make decisions based on different things, and I think not everyone make all the decisions the same way for all decisions. So even if you could be normally considered as very meticulous, you do your pros and cons chart, but for some things in our life, you just go on a hunch. And that's also being real, and there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I hear you about you wish you've done it earlier. And I want to jump a bit more about school, right? How was it like to study again 10 years into your career?
I was going to school with people that were 10 years younger than me as well because the system is so different. I felt like in Singapore, the first thing that the moment you graduate, what do? Your parents push you to get a job. And I think, and then you think about, okay, once I get my first job, when do I get my first house or car? And then life gets, and then like these things take you, and then you just have to keep working. But this is not the case, I've realized, in a different, completely different context, like in Germany, where because education is supported, it's likely not everyone will agree with me. Because education is supported, people just like very easily go on to further their education at a younger age. So I was going to school with people that were to a certain extent younger than me. And how was it like? I learned great knowledge, technical stuff. I don't have to get into that. I went to school to learn that, to get my ESG analyst qualifications and all that. So that was all good. A learning that I realized was that actually age doesn't really matter. And actually what I really enjoyed was talking to my classmates, because a lot of them were at, no matter how old they were and from how many different countries, because it was people that were from around Germany and around the world, that actually, I'm not unique at all. They dropped everything. Some people came from places where it would be really hard to get a visa to get into Germany, but everyone tried, and we all met in Hamburg and we did our course. I really respect that. I'm not the only one on a journey like that. But one thing that I really enjoyed was to talk to my classmates about their aspirations, because something that I didn't realize that I was missing in 3 years, like working in corporate jobs, if you climb the ladder, was this idea of thinking what's next or the possibilities. But when you study, you go, oh, I could do this, or I could be there's so many possibilities. And then you have all this uncertainty, but you also have a lot of dreams. And I felt like if I was having a conversation with some people that became my good friends, we would have a cup of coffee and start talking about what you're going to do after graduation. What are you applying for? What do you plan to do with your life? Which country do you want to be in? And I feel like these conversations were so inspiring, and it made me think about the possibilities in life, that sometimes if you're in a career in one place, and again, it's a privilege to have possibilities, I realized that if I didn't have this experience, I wouldn't be thinking in this way. And so I think one thing that I loved was, even though I am mid-career, I felt like I was graduating all over again as an early 20-something-year-old, wondering what the career paths were going to be like for me after graduation. And there was a lot of uncertainty, I'm not going to lie, that I struggled with. But also I told myself that how many times in life am I going to be at a point in time where I'm going to have so many options to choose from. And even to not know what's next can be something that's very exciting and empowering than to keep knowing what is next or what you have to do next.
You knew this. I did my exchange 4 months, not 2 years or 3 years like you. 4 months when I was much younger in Europe, in Eastern Europe, in Budapest, Hungary. Like all those things that you said, yeah, now come flashing back. I think I was 25 back then, and it's exciting to know what come may. And I think now that I'm much older, and is this context that I think maybe in Singapore and in Asia is that there's a certain set path, right, that you see, be it society or be it your families, your friends, your colleagues that are really on. And then you get lost in all those stuff. You just think that's the norm. You just follow what everyone is doing. But I think when you're in an environment where you are studying, and I think regardless how old they are, your fellow students are, but I think having that space to be thinking about what they want to do with their lives, I think it can be very energizing. So I think I can relate to that. The other point that came to my head is that I think earlier we implied that taking 2 years to study could be putting some brakes on your career. But actually, now that you spoke about it, this 2 years could just be a great accelerator for your career. And the context is this, and that's what I've been sharing with people. In the modern world today, we are expected to work at least 40 years, right? Let's say in Singapore, let's say a guy goes to NS. After NS, after national service in Singapore, a university graduate probably graduates at age 23 or 24. And Singapore's retirement age now is about, I think, 63, I think. And there's always plans to increase the retirement age. So that's at least 40 years of career. But life expectancy, we expect to die, I think, in 80s now. What's 2 years, what's 3 years that you're thinking now on a sabbatical or studies in the grand scheme of a 40-year-old career? And I think these friendships, these experiences you have could just be a great enhancer and great accelerator for your career. So I say to you, I say this to myself, and I say this to whoever's listening in, that sometimes what we think is taking a back step or a side step could end up pushing you much further down the road. And
That's
you
so
didn't come
true.
back. You didn't come back, right? After Hamburg is done, and then you're still in Germany. Tell me
Yes.
more. Tell me more.
Well, still in a very Singaporean mindset, I thought if I do my master's, after I'm done, I'm going to jump 2 rungs up the ladder. So it's still that very, I'm going to do it. No, now
Leather,
I've
yeah,
gotten my
yeah, leather.
qualifications.
Yeah.
And of course, there's an expectation because why invest the time or the money or the resources to further your education? I went in before the 2 years thinking that was going to be the outcome. But what I didn't expect to see coming is during the 2 years, on top of growing or challenging myself and my expectations with life in general, in all those 2 years, I was also working freelance. And I was also very lucky because I had clients, I had my company in Singapore that really were open to working with me remotely. So I was working freelance for 2 years. And that changed a little bit. That started to build that or change my perspective on what work and life can be. And it was actually one of the most hectic times of my life. I was actually unwilling to compromise being a student and having a career, one or the other. I wanted everything. So my life then would be waking up at 6 a.m. Germany time. Sometimes in winter, it's completely dark outside, rushing to do my first conference call in Singapore time because it would be afternoon, talking to clients, talking to colleagues, getting work done. And then at 9 a.m., going to school, having a full day of school lessons. And then after school, going back and continue my work. So at some point, actually, to cut my long story short, I had 3 to 4 different jobs. And that really burnt me out as well because I wanted everything. But what those lessons also taught me was I can be flexible with my time. I can drive myself crazy taking on too much sometimes, but I learned how to be flexible with finding time to work or finding time to relax when people are working. I can do my own thing just because I'm freelancing. Like that. And it took some time to get used to it, I think. But I got used to the idea of working remotely across different time zones and being flexible with my time. And then that eventually led me to one project after another after I graduated, just different projects that came as a result of the work that I was doing in this area. Again, I dive into projects, I dive into opportunities. I don't really think twice. If it feels right, I do it. But one thing really leads to another because I start building a portfolio in sustainability and communications. I start getting to widen my networks beyond Singapore, actually global networks through different projects and different opportunities. And so I've been so lucky that I can build on different projects. And eventually it got me to the place where I'm like, I'm freelancing, I'm working on different projects, and I think I can start seeing some of these projects as clients that I work with and do my own thing and be comfortable or more comfortable doing this as opposed to maybe a 9 to 5.
We spoke previously before about career, about the portfolio career. And then you mentioned portfolio earlier. I want to get your thoughts on that. But I think before we get there, I think the comment that I want to make is that, yeah, you and I, we still come back talking about climbing the ladder, right? And ideally climbing up the ladder, right? And I just had a thought, right? What if the goal is not to climb up any ladder, but to find your life's work? And I heard this phrase somewhere, right? It's your life's work to find your life's work. And how do I define life's work? It's where work feels like play or it's very natural for you, where you are in a role, in an environment, in an industry that you feel for, that is aligned with your strengths, with your vision. And I personally think it's not the easiest to find your life's work. For me, I have a day job and I'm doing this podcast in an attempt to find my life's work. And I think it's always going to be taking time, in my opinion. There's some people who wake up or who grew up knowing that they can be pilots or policemen or firemen, banker or lawyer. I think that's good for them, right? Then they can just do the things in between to align to their goal. But I think most of us are not like that. So yeah, I think what if the goal in life is not to climb any ladder, but to find your life's work? And hence, doing different things like a portfolio career, it's your attempt to find your life's work. And again, the context is that we're going to be working at least 40 years, full-time at least, right? Unless you're born with a silver spoon. So what's that few years, I feel? And that's always something that I tell to young graduates about really taking time to find good bosses, good organizations to learn early in a career. Tell me what you know and what you think about a portfolio career.
I don't know whether I read it somewhere, I came up with that term on my own, but the truth is, it's not such an easy path, or not everything was roses all the way. The truth is, when I had doors closed in my face when I was trying to go for stable jobs, but because also I am in a really unique field where I am working in sustainability and I'm a communicator. And things have not always been growing in these two industries, I think, globally in recent times. So I come in with a really general and unique skill set. It doesn't fit every organization. So some of the expectations I had when I was looking at jobs and whatever, I felt like I wouldn't be 100% fit in these jobs. But also there was no JD out there, job description, where I'm like, yes, this is something I want to do. I really found that very hard to come by.
So
Roles
you
in
write your own JD,
sustainability.
right? So you
Yeah,
write your
so
own
I
JD.
write my own JD. Yeah, exactly. And that's what I wanted to do. I was like, okay, if no one thinks that my skill set is going to be relevant for your organization, I'm going to find my own organization that's to, not organization, I'm going to find my own opportunities and build my own opportunities. I think I was also very fatigued by the whole AI driven resume process. And I think that it's at the moment. It's like AI filters people into jobs, and then to outsmart AI, people use AI to boost their resume. And actually, it's just like upon of AI. And I was like, I don't have the time for this. I've invested so much of my time and my life into to building my career in sustainability and communications. I'm not going to leave it to AI to tell me whether I suit a job or not. So if no companies are going to come to me, I'm going to go be finding projects or the clients that help me further my skills and my experience in this area. And that's how I got into events that were about bringing business leaders together to talk about sustainability or climate. I got into projects that were about working with industry to transform. And it's not just one project or one company. I'm currently right now lucky enough to be able to do it across different projects. And this has expanded my portfolio and my experience much more exponentially than if I were to go into a narrow job scope and hoping that, that to get that experience through one company.
I must say now it takes balls. I can't think of a better word. I think it takes guts. But I think from there, I also infer that you're someone that seeks fulfillment, right? You just don't want to be defined by a box or defined by a JD that doesn't really suit you perfectly. And I think because when people face that, not everyone take the path that you did, right? To do your own thing. I have another thought. It's also that this concept of career ladder, I think it's an outdated one. I think I learned this word about calling it a career jungle because it's no longer a literally linear path now for careers. I think a lot of things are happening very quickly. What you used to do, in fact, the jobs that you and I are doing now probably didn't exist at the time when we were studying. ESG, I don't think is that big of an issue or a concern or a priority when we were studying. At least that's what I think from my side. So then how do we prepare for the future, right? So there's no longer a linear path, I think, for career. I think it's really a jungle where you move sideways sometimes, you move up sometimes, you move down sometimes so that you can go up sometimes. And maybe you need to find a different jungle, right? You don't stay at the same spot in the jungle. And I think that corresponds with the concept of a portfolio career. But I do want to spend some time talking about ESG. I think it's something that you're very clearly passionate about. If you were to explain ESG to a class of 12-year-olds, primary 6 students, how would you best do it?
What a challenge.
You're welcome.
Maybe I would ask them to envision, if they're 12 years old today, I would ask them to envision what do they want the planet to be like 10 or 20 years from now, and to describe that. And maybe they can talk about people being happy, their families being healthy. They can talk about how, I want the ocean to be full of whales and happy whales and the jungles to be full of happy elephants. Maybe, I actually know 12 years old, they're maybe more mature than that. But ask them to describe the future of the world that they want. And I think that if anything, I would bet that they would envision something like nice, big, fun, and everyone wants a better world for themselves. And I think that is the fundamental part of like why bother about sustainability, why a Fortune 500 kind of CEO needs to think about not just what's in the next annual reporting of the company, what is the value that your business or your industry is bringing 10, 20 years down the line. So we always think about future generations and want to preserve a better planet. But there's some immediate and very clear challenges that are happening around the world. That's not just the result of one actor or one villain that's driving all this change, right? But it's like the collective impact of some of the challenges that we are creating for ourselves. So I would say to the 12-year-old, sustainability is just making sure that while you can still build a life, where you can still have a job, you still find fulfillment in the next 10, 20 years, it's also making sure that the world and society or your neighborhood in the next 10 to 20 years is still one that looks even better than it is today. And I think that would be the fundamental reason for why even think about sustainability and ESG.
You can tell concepts to 12-year-olds, but I think for a fresh grad looking on a serious career path, right? And then how do you bring all this concept into tangible stuff, right? And I think there's also other angle about how receptive is the Asian companies to ESG. And I ask you this because you work in Singapore on ESG topics. And maybe share with us your experience working on ESG issues in Singapore.
And I had to work with individuals like Singaporeans to ask them for donations to an environmental NGO. You had to go to philanthropists or even businesses to get them to support. And I think maybe my personal learning from that is there might be a sense that, oh, why bother about sustainability? It's a Western concept. Sometimes it's a bit of a more knee-jerk reaction or general statement to make. But at the same time, there's also so much opportunity for a family trust, a family office, a philanthropist, or even you and me as individuals in Singapore to think about, because people think about their families. And what's very Asian is I want my family to be okay. I want my children to be okay. I want society to be better off. And I think that helping people understand why protect a forest, why protect the ocean, what does that have to do with their families or the immediate benefits? I think that was the trick in getting people to care about the environment. I'm not sure whether to answer your question. Sometimes I go off and
all good. I just want to bring it back to, let's say, in a corporate setting, right? And and one thing that could help me to understand is, at least for your time at WWF, was it the founding team? How long have they been in Singapore when you joined them? How big was the team in Singapore?
Not that it definitely grew at the time that I was there, but it was already there for many years. I was just one of the many people that joined. So I wasn't really anything amazing, but it did grow a lot as people were more conscious about environmental issues.
I'm curious about, how does the corporate structure look like for ESG kind of roles? You mentioned like the chief XO, CXO is the chief CSO, right? Sustainability officer. Is that the usual common term? And then what are the supporting functions that support this CSO?
Actually, that's interesting because the industry is changing. So there are chief sustainability officers. It's a role that you're starting to see. You probably see in a lot of leading companies, especially the bigger companies.
Yep.
And then under the CSO, sometimes there's a sustainability team. So having a sustainability function, that's something that probably most large companies already have. But the change that's actually happening right now is that the sustainability functions don't function on their own. And in fact, where sustainability work or the obligation to work on sustainability is actually within the function. So I talked about legal, finance, procurement. These are the functions in an organization that previously, maybe they are focused on the business, but now people already in this role have to think about and factor in ESG considerations and risks as well. There are careers in sustainability where you maybe focus on reporting or planning for the entire organization, but it never sits cleanly within one team. In fact, I see it more embedded across various leaders in the organization already. And also the leadership, like CEOs, board members. There's also another area where there's a lot of push or expectation of leadership from the top on making some big decisions on sustainability or ESG for a company.
I got this weird question. What is the scale of the smallest size company or organizations that you work with in the field of sustainability and ESG?
Some experience with some startups that, because they're not climate tech startups or circularity startups, and actually they come with really interesting technologies or interesting new business models to address some of the sustainability challenges. Actually, that's the most exciting thing. There's a growing climate tech startup ecosystem in Singapore. There's a really established one here in Berlin, one of which, like a climate startup, has got really records amounts of funding this year. So I think startups, entrepreneurs, this is an area that's also really growing when it comes to providing sustainability solutions and services. Maybe I'm one of them as well.
What kind of services do they would ask from you then? Would they need from you then? This sustainability or climate change kind of startups?
I help the entrepreneurs because I understand the business model and the need for it or the wider challenges. My work with entrepreneurs and businesses right now really focuses on helping them sharpen their messaging. So as an entrepreneur, sometimes, or even as a leader of a small startup, I just know that you have to go with all engines running. You're thinking about 10,000 different things in your head at any one point in time. They know their business really well. They can do a really good sales pitch. But where maybe sometimes they need a bit of external perspective is, I need to put together an investor deck to really pitch to growth in a new market, or how do I capture certain insights to pitch to investors to maybe get more funding. So I think it's more of working with founders and entrepreneurs in this area to help them have actually a simpler, understandable message on that would work with their investors. So not really sustainability, but messaging for any entrepreneur.
And I think as much as I'll say most of your work, your career stuff has been on sustainability, you even uprooted yourself to a different continent to immerse yourself in this topic. Let's talk about your next exciting project or one of your current projects right now. I think you told me the project name is Human and Herd. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, this is also so alongside my sustainability consulting, I also co-found Human and Herd with a very close friend and partner of mine who has been in communications. And sustainability is still very much part of what I want to do as part of that. But one thing that inspired and why we wanted to do that is because, again, I've been working on sustainability for so long, and you're always on the lookout, or I'm on the lookout for who can I follow or who can I trust when they talk about a solution or a need. For some time, it was corporates, when they're making commitments and all that. But increasingly, I find that I'm most inspired when I hear an individual who says something about sustainability that's useful, but also has values or has done things in their life that I really look up to. Or even business owners that take the plunge. I'm not the only one. Business owners that take the plunge to start up in a climate or sustainability space. Because I feel like the most interesting voices and the most interesting perspectives in sustainability or even industries outside of it come from individuals within a company, leaders or people that I know as people rather than the businesses that they work for. Me and my partner, we found a need or a market need or an opportunity to offer communications that's led by humans, that focuses on human voices and elevating what people that we believe in. It has to be people that we believe in or leaders with products that we love, and then working with them to better pitch to investors or better reach their consumers. So yeah, that's Human and Herd. And at the heart of it is human, just because so much of communications is AI right now. AI enabled is fine, but also with content overload in the digisphere or like in the universe, we just see that there's so much opportunity to offer the voices of real people with real experiences to make our connections online as authentic as possible, rather than being crowded out by the noise of AI and everything else that's online.
You said you want to work with people that you believe in. What factors will make you believe in them?
I wish I have a formula for this.
Instinct, right?
But
Because that's the central theme of your life, no? Instinct, gut feel. I'm not saying it in a
it's
negative
true.
way. Don't get me wrong. And I believe in the power of the gut feeling. But I just wonder if you're gonna mix this with business and now you've got a partner. Have you talked about with your partner, or have you thought about what are some of the factors or the common factors that will make this person believable or make this person likable? Because that's a business decision.
That's true. I think very generally, for example, if you run a business, like if you're talking about your podcast, I actually want to hear about your story. Why did you start On My Own Terms podcast? What different aspects of your life are aligned with why do you want to give a platform to conversations about career transitions? I'm using you as an example, but I think what we're looking for is leaders that are willing to go beyond work, beyond their day jobs, or even beyond their companies. And there is going to be a demand. This is a market that's growing. I think everybody, even business leaders sitting down there, know that you cannot just say, I work for a big company or I lead this big company. That's all to it. That's all there is to it. Your investors or maybe even your consumers, they want to buy products from someone they like. And how do you be likable and authentic? I think that's the magic that's where the magic comes together. And I really do think it comes from like me understanding what about your life or what about your past experiences, or actually most importantly, the challenges that you went through maybe as a person. How did it get you to where you are today, where you have platform to build, a product to sell, or a business to grow?
Oh, I know you didn't give me the opportunity, but I'm going to take this opportunity anyway to talk about a bit about myself and also me starting this On My Own Terms podcast. I think I think it's important in general to find out the why. I think that's something you imply as well. I think the why is important. I think the how and the what is also important. How changes with time, with technology, with different methods. I think the why is a very big central motivation. The why would give you some sort of probability that the person or the founder or the creator will sustain this, we call it hustle project or passion project, even when times goes tough. I think when the going gets tough, I think the why is important. I think that amplifies in the style of the kind of chats I have with people on the podcast. I think I want to find out about human story, the journey. Sometimes it's unconscious or subconscious. What they do now is a byproduct of their life journey. Career is just a vehicle for what we do to sustain ourselves. But of course, in this podcast episodes, in this podcast, I also talk on topics beyond just about career. Career is just the vehicle where I think most of us spend at least a third of our waking hours on. I think it's a vehicle for us to exhibit our strengths, our passions, our vision, and our skills. No, I hear you. I don't know whether you want to hear more or there's any other questions you have about this. But when you spoke about all the stuff that you just talked about, I'm already forming areas and ideas on where you can hunt for such people. And I hear you that there is a growing opportunity or growing pool of people who dabble in like passion projects outside of day jobs. I think now it's about, see, I'm a BD guy, right? I'm a business development guy. So I put on my BD hat, and I think it's exciting. I want to turn the attention to AI. I hear you about the why behind human and herd. I want to hear about how do you use AI, if any. How do you use AI now?
It's something that I started thinking a lot about, and I am in communications. I deal with words 90% of my work. It's about writing and it's about words. And I really think that AI has changed so much by automating certain things, even the creative process, that it's made writing very cheap. So one of the biggest kind of conversations, or a conversation that I really remember, is what's the difference between throwing something to ChatGPT and getting something churned out in just 5 seconds versus without AI, I'll be laboring over a written piece for a few days. And of course, it brings unbelievable efficiency and speed to our work every day. And that's why I use AI, and I use it. It also helps me organize my thoughts. Sometimes I'm just like putting too much words into an email. It helps me. So I use AI. But I also have grown to appreciate, I want to think about writing as creating art. It's artisanship. If you can have a factory churning out 5,000 pieces of clothing every hour, but you also find that beauty in someone sitting there and hand stitching a piece of fabric or creating something from hand. There is room for both of these things in our world today. And increasingly, I would love to see writing and words being the same. Like AI can automate certain types of communications where you need speed more than anything. But also, we must not forget like the beauty of the effort of putting something together, and then you kind of labor over it. You think about, oh, this doesn't sound quite right. It applies to writing, but it also applies to, I don't know, when you're an artist or painter or whatever. It's the time spent on something that could also be really beautiful. This is something that someone said to me, but it really made me think a lot about how I use AI and how I don't want to be lazy, especially when it comes to creating a certain piece of work. There's certain times where I really want to have my own writing and words be reflected rather than something that came through AI. So I think that's what really matters to me. But also because I'm in communications, I'm so sensitive and I use AI every day. So I can tell when something is AI generated. I think a lot of people can do. And I think a lot of people, you ask anybody and they'll have this one thing that they don't like about AI generated content. So I think we talked a lot about authenticity. I do think that AI has to do with authenticity as well, because if you don't use it right, actually, and if I see someone post a LinkedIn post that's only AI driven content, I can tell immediately, and I'll believe like 20% of it. And I think that's such a waste, because sometimes I think people have really good thoughts, but when you don't put in an effort to make it your own, or even imperfections and all, it's a waste of, it undercuts or undermines the authenticity that's behind the idea, just because you threw something into ChatGPT and it coughed out something for you and then you just threw it onto your LinkedIn. So I do think that we have to be very conscious of our use of AI in using it to talking about like ourselves and our thoughts and what we put out.
You use AI to work in the business. How about on the business, right? As you work in your portfolio career, being like a freelance consultancy, how do you use AI, if any?
I use it to automate a lot of things, honestly, like things that I would actually AI or ChatGPT, because I work alone. I want to be honest, like I really miss the times where I'll be in an office, I turn to my colleague and ask a stupid question, and then we have a conversation. And because I work remotely and alone, I don't have this team to work. And ChatGPT has become my best friend sometimes. For the silliest things, does this sentence make sense? Something I would ask somebody next to me, I actually ask ChatGPT now. So because it's become my best colleague.
Do you know that? I bet you have ChatGPT app on your phone, right? 2 days back, I actually chatted verbally for the first time So I downloaded, so I used the paid version, and I was looking for, I'm going to go for a business trip in Indonesia, and I was looking for the nearest hotel. So I could type it, but I was driving and I just want to try the chat function, and it works. And the accent and the delivery was quite good. So you can actually have a verbal conversation with ChatGPT, just FYI.
Okay.
The information after that I saw was crap. It was not exactly true. It's not the nearest hotel to where I was going to go, but the delivery was very natural. Yeah. So that's something that you can try as well. I'm an audio guy and I like to multitask in a way. And when I have things in my head, I want to just quickly say it out. And I thought that was a good way to really use it or train ChatGPT, right, to know my context. So just FYI.
Thanks for this. Yeah, I've never really used it. I don't know, maybe that's still the old school part of me. I don't use it in my personal life. I don't even have an app, but I do have it on my desktop. And yeah, it's a huge work tool. And I have different projects and I use it to organize and I make sure that the information doesn't feed, like that the privacy of the information is protected. I think that's also really important with what I do.
I interviewed someone recently who is in this space, right? He has also his own like agency of sorts or consultancy of sorts that helps SMEs do AI automation. So he's giving some very good advice and tips about using different LLMs for different things. So not ChatGPT could be a jack of all trades, but there are some that are particularly good or better in a particular thing. So to know what that is, you better check out the episode. Okay, so just for me to make sure that you subscribe and you like the episode. Now, I think I have two parts left. I think it's about closing reflections and also career change. And I think you mentioned career change, and I think is there anything that you want to share, is there a message you want to throw out there on career change?
Having made a career change, I don't think I made a career change. I think I thought a lot about whether what I've done, moving countries while deepening my expertise, is it a career change or career pivot? I do think that what was feasible for me in my context was making a career pivot so that I could continue to pursue what I loved. And some people find their passion in the middle of their careers and want to do more of it. So I pivoted by building on what I was already good at, which was communications and my background in that, but making that pivot further into sustainability. I do think that actually differentiating between changing your career completely versus career pivots, I think that these are actually two very different paths and different people would have different reasons to do either. And I think my experience speaks more to pivoting. Looking back, I also think that it wasn't one big thing. And I think sometimes we think, I'm so stressed or burnt out by work, I'm going to drop everything. I think that's everybody's instinct. But of course, we all have responsibilities to and obligations in real life. So if for me, actually, my pivot was a series of steps that took place over several years. It eventually took me to a different country, but it wasn't something that happened overnight. So I do think that for people thinking about changing their careers, there are a lot of things you can do in the meantime, smaller steps in a direction that you want to take that are less risky than a complete change that are also feasible. So I think maybe that's one kind of reflection I have on my own journey that I feel could be useful for somebody thinking about something like that.
Would going to Germany to study be considered a small step?
I feel like I'm not the. It was a big change for me. But I'm like, is my story exceptional? So many people change countries in
Great.
search of a different experience.
Wonderful. Yes. Sometimes, I'm not saying Singapore is too small, but when you sometimes step into a different environment, then you realize that the world is much bigger out there, right? You find like-minded people, you find your tribe. Then you realize that what you have done could be defined as a big move back in your own comfortable background and environment. But when you go out there and find your tribe, you realize that, hey, this is what I'm meant to do. This is what I am supposed to do, right? Everyone else is doing the same thing. So how dramatic or how different was it for me to do the same? So sometimes that change in environment could just really change your perspective about the things you have done with your life.
Actually, a lot of Singaporeans, because of how small the country is, I know a lot of Singaporeans have the aspiration to go overseas, maybe for an extended period of time. I do see that a lot with maybe my friends or my social circles. Not everyone obviously can do it. But yeah, I think I would encourage, take that risk. It's not such a big change. Around the world, people move countries or are forced to move countries sometimes for various reasons. And it really has added actually a different dimension to how I know myself, not even just career. Actually, it was me and personal development that happened with adapting to a foreign country. And actually that shaped my career and my perspective on my career. It wasn't career first and then I figured myself out after that. And I think that personal-led growth that came from being in a different context really helped me in my experience as a person. And I think I would
you not want to come
recommend
back?
this for people, but it's not the easiest journey, it isn't.
Would you not want to come back to Singapore?
For sure, I would. I'm more Singaporean than ever. I ordered 5 bottles of Kaya this morning. I'm having a National Day party in a month. I'm as Singaporean as someone would come, but I also think that because we're so privileged to have a global view to start with, and actually I was privileged to not have to worry about my parents. So I do think that being in Singapore gives us the privilege to look out elsewhere, outwards. And I'm like, yeah, of course I'll go back if I ever have to one day.
Sounds like a tough life, huh? To have to come to Singapore. But I want to jump on that and say that because we living in Singapore, we really have a lot. I always think that I won this ovarian lottery just because I'm born in Singapore. And I think more people should take more risks because we really have a lot good going. But sometimes I see that it cripples people, right? We are a victim of our own success because things are going so well here, so comfortable here. We're so well taken care of in Singapore. Then that has less push for us to look for a better opportunity. That we're not that hungry as maybe our parents' generation. But I argue the opposite, right? And I think I sent you a story or a LinkedIn post about Sweden. I think it's my model country. They're a rich country, not a huge population, what 9 million or 10 million the last I checked. But yet they're able to have global brands. Why can't Singapore be like that? And then why can't, and I think for context, Sweden has like global brands in quite diverse industries. If for a population that size, they've got 3 automobile brands. I think 2 already sold to Chinese companies. You've got Volvo, Scania, and one more I forgot. You've got IKEA, you've got H&M in fashion. So yeah, I just want to say that we shouldn't let our assets cripple us. We shouldn't let our assets cripple us. I think with that, we should actually use that as a springboard to take bigger risks. Because, and the next thing I want to say is more of a personal view is that because I think on our deathbeds, all we have are war stories, memories. I don't think anyone talks about their bank account on their deathbeds. And yeah, and the other sub point is that I think this personal growth thing, I think is wonderful. I think when there is a personal development, I think that could be a huge enabler for you to do many things well beyond just a career, right? When you're able to find yourself, discover yourself, when you put yourself in situations where you're surprised by your abilities to adapt. And that could be a great leveler to do everything else in life. And also, like, face rejection, okay, so what? I move on, right? Face rejection, okay, I try again. Because you've done worse or more dramatic changes before in your life. And I think that makes a good story, or that becomes or makes you a bit more capable and effective down the road. So I know I'm babbling. Yeah.
Not at all, not at all. I'm going to jump in and add on because one thing, it's been a tough economy. People have lost jobs in Singapore. And somebody that lost their job told me last year that even if you don't change as a person, the change is going to come for you.
Yep.
So I think the biggest misconception is that things are going to be as they are. I'm going to be the career that I am and I'm going to go on this path. You think what you have in front of you is a ladder, but you're so wrong. So I think this idea of change and changing yourself or seeing that as a need rather than have things happen to you is also that maybe a mindset change that people need to be aware of.
Spot on. Are we ready for lightning rounds? Closing
You mean the
reflection?
last hour or so wasn't a lightning round?
The answers you gave were not lightning, that's for sure. Okay, I asked you this, like a different version, but I want to try this one again. I think to someone who is currently in a corporate job and considering a side hustle, a side business, or to run his own consultancy, what's one piece of advice you would give?
Can I give 2?
Sure. If
Take
you must,
small
yeah.
steps. You don't have to upend your life, but also think about how you can manage the risk. That's very practical. I think people are held back by fear, but what actually helped me was know who your network is. Make sure that your family is fine even without you. When you make a change, make sure you have the support. I was very lucky to have all this. It was a village that supported me when I wanted to do my own career growth. And I would be like, get that sorted, know who your friends are, your allies are, and get them behind you, and then you can make that.
There's 4, no? There's not 2, huh? I'm taking notes, huh? Take small steps, manage your risk, get the support you need, and then know your network.
Rapid fire, I need to remind myself.
No, all good. Okay, I want to zoom out to just beyond career and career change. What's one piece of conventional career or life advice that you completely disagree with now?
The 5-year plan.
Tell me more.
I think as I'm driven by instinct, but for my first job, people will be asking you, what's your 5-year plan? I'm like, does it even apply to anybody right now? Not even individual, but business.
Okay. I laugh because maybe I never heard about 5-year plan. For me, it's like a 2-year plan. Maybe I was being in tech, that's why it's much faster. And then lately, as I joined this new company that I'm in, they never talk about 5-year plan. They just talk about what's your first 90 days going to be like. So my final 2 questions: what's one book, movie, YouTube video, or podcast you found yourself recommending to others lately, and why?
Okay, a movie actually that I just watched over the weekend that I cannot stop thinking about is Triangle of Sadness. Have you heard of it?
No.
It's about capitalism, it's about power, and all wrapped up in a really exciting movie. And it was like a award winner. So Triangle of Sadness would highly recommend to anyone that actually wants a European film that's great. And actually, I just discovered a podcast. Being a mid-career woman that's still young, I'm sometimes always look out for podcasts that cater to women and our needs. And I just discovered the podcast, and One Should Know, like instead of one is WON. One half of it is Andrea Cruz. It speaks to a female audience that's about health issues that actually I do care about at this stage of my life as well. So that's something that I'm excited to actually learn more about, because on top of thinking about career and personal growth, I also think that health very much goes hand in hand.
First one was Triangle of Sadness. It's a movie, and that's on any streaming platform.
I think it's on Prime.
Got it. And second one?
One Should Know, WON, and that's on Spotify, but they also have a YouTube.
Got it. I will get the links on the show notes. The last question is, if you could have a billboard with any message you want to broadcast, what would it be?
My billboard would be get out of your comfort zone. I think that has been a theme of my life, and that's what's driven me. And I know that this term is really common, but I think to make the choices on a daily basis or big life choices based on being uncomfortable is not for everyone, but somehow I just feel the need to do that. I wish I was more comfortable, but I'm constantly pushing myself. And maybe that's the one thing that's going to be on my billboard or gravestone. I don't know.
Life is a lot about trade-offs. So is policy making. And I'm curious, because of your life motto of getting out of your comfort zone, what do you think have been some of the trade-offs?
I do think I wish I was more financially stable. Because starting your own thing, there's always a lot of uncertainty that comes with it. And I feel like that's something I've still worked towards. And I look to people that are more established than me, and I'm like, oh, sometimes a 9-to-5 job really gives you that peace of mind. And I think the second thing is just time. Like, I really miss my nephew and my niece growing up. My parents, I know, are getting older every day. I don't get to see them. And I think that's anyone that doesn't live in their home country goes through this constant feeling of trade-off of you have to fulfill yourself. You want to live your life. But at the same time, a big part of your life and your family, they are moving on without you. And this is a constant, I think it's something that everyone living overseas can relate to.
Yeah. Thank you for being so candid. I really like those very honest, candid answers. Europe, it's a good time zone to be in, right? You can have the American markets and then also the Asian markets. Well, I'd be happy to chat more with you about potential business connections and opportunities. And I think, and also thanks to you and what you said so far, I think I've got a clearer idea about who could be your potential client and who could be a potential target audience, so to speak. I think for me, it's giving me more clarity compared to the first chat that we had. But I think it's also it's an evolution in progress. It's a journey in progress. I think getting clarity about what you want to do. And I hope at least I've done that for you, with you, in this conversation. I think that is a perfect way to end this conversation. I wish we could talk more. Thank you very much, Jan, for your time and being very candid with us and sharing about your life journey, your career journey, and also your current plans and exciting projects they're working on. So with that, we thank you, and maybe there could be a part 2. I hope people listening in who would like to hear from Jan. And maybe one final question, and I apologize, I said this earlier. For those listening in who want to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
LinkedIn. I'm at Janissa Ng. I'll share with you the details.
Good. Great. Thank you, Jan. We speak soon.